Welcome, seekers of shadows, to the Silent Lodge. Tonight, we open the crypts of time to explore one of the darkest legends, the origins of vampires. From ancient civilizations to modern stories, this figure has haunted humanity for centuries. Before we dive in, remember, if you enjoy exploring myths and mysteries, subscribe to the Silent Lodge and join our growing circle of seekers. Your support keeps these stories alive. The vampire, as we imagine it today, an undead creature feeding on the living, was not born overnight. It emerged slowly, shaped by fears, myths, and unexplained tragedies. The earliest whispers of the vampire myth can be traced to Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization. Here, the dead were feared not only in burial, but also in their return. The Sumerians believed the underworld was bleak and final. But sometimes, spirits slipped free, restless and angry. Their return meant terror for the living. Among these spirits were the Akimu. They were souls of those who died suddenly or without proper burial. Doomed to wander, they fed on the living to ease their torment. The Utuku were even darker. Malevolent spirits who haunted deserts, mountains, and shores. They brought illness, misfortune, and fear wherever they appeared. What made them frightening was their hunger. They did not simply exist. They preyed on humans, draining vitality and spreading dread. To protect themselves, people turned to priests. Rituals and offerings were meant to bind spirits to the underworld or appease their anger. Respecting the dead was more than tradition. It was survival. Neglect a burial, and you might awaken a restless spirit. From Mesopotamia, the shadow traveled west. In Greece, spirits took new shapes, becoming monstrous beings with faces and bodies, not just whispers in the night. The Empusa was one such terror. She had one leg of brass and another of a donkey, her hair aflame. A servant of Hecate, she preyed on lonely travelers. Then came the Lamia. At first, she was a child-stealing demon. Later, she became a seductress, enchanting men before revealing her monstrous form. Both Empusa and Lamia blended allure with horror. They were beautiful, yet deadly, embodying the fear of desire turning into death. In them, we see the vampire taking shape, not only a monster, but a creature that seduces before it destroys. As Greece's myths fade into history, the vampire's story prepares to take a darker turn. Ahead lies medieval Europe, where plague, religion, and fear of the grave would bring the vampire we know today. From the myths of Greece, we now cross into Eastern Europe, the land where the vampire truly took root. Here, fear of the grave and faith in the church shaped chilling legends. The word vampire itself traces back to the Slavic term upir, first recorded around the 11th century. It meant the dead who rose again, hungry for the living. In Slavic villages, death was never the end. If someone died violently or without proper rites, they risked becoming a vampire. Unlike the elegant vampires of film, these early figures were bloated and ruddy-faced. They looked more like corpses than aristocrats. At night, they left their graves to attack neighbors, draining life through touch, breath, or even blood. Illness and misfortune were often blamed on them. The cure was brutal. Corpses suspected of vampirism were exhumed, staked through the heart, or burned to ash. Communities did this to protect themselves. Religion played a powerful role. The vampire was not just a monster, but a soul damned, denied peace for sins in life. One of the darkest names linked to vampirism is Vlad III Dracula, better known as Vlad the Impaler. A prince of Wallachia, he was both feared and respected. Vlad earned his name by impaling enemies on stakes, leaving fields of corpses as warnings. His cruelty made him infamous across Europe. The name Dracula came from his father, Vlad II, a member of the Order of the Dragon. In Romanian, Dracul means both dragon and devil. Bram Stoker would later take this name, giving it to his fictional Count Dracula. Though not a true copy of Vlad, the novel forever tied him to vampire lore. Disease deepened the terror. During Europe's plagues, villagers believed the dead rose to spread sickness. Corpses were dug up, examined, and mutilated to stop the vampire curse. Even in New England, centuries later, families blamed tuberculosis on vampires. Rituals involved burning hearts of the dead to save the living. This period, marked by fear, plague, and faith, gave the vampire its strongest roots. It was no longer just myth. It was a cultural nightmare. And soon, the vampire would rise beyond folklore, entering courts, legal records, and the writings that carried its legend across Europe. By the 17th and 18th centuries, vampire fear reached its peak. Across Eastern Europe, entire villages lived in dread of the dead rising from their graves. This terror sparked what historians now call the vampire panic. Communities exhumed bodies to prove or prevent vampirism. One of the earliest recorded cases comes from Serbia. Pedar Blagojevic, a peasant, was said to have returned from the dead to kill 9 neighbors. When his body was dug up, it showed little decay. Villagers drove a stake through his chest and burned him, convinced he was a vampire. Another chilling story comes from Arnold Powell, also Serbian. He claimed in life to have been attacked by a vampire. After his death, locals swore he returned to prey on them. When exhumed, Powell's body appeared fresh. Officials ordered his corpse staked and burned, yet the panic spread, with more villagers accused of vampirism. These cases weren't isolated. From Hungary to Prussia, similar reports appeared. Local authorities, priests, and even military officials documented them. Western Europe soon took notice. Reports of vampire attacks entered newspapers, legal documents, and travel writings, sparking curiosity beyond the Balkans. This fascination carried into the literary world. Writers transformed the bloated corpses of folklore into more aristocratic, haunting figures. The turning point came in 1819 with John Polidori's short story, The Vampire. Written in the same era that birthed Frankenstein, it shaped the modern vampire. Polidori's vampire, Lord Ruthven, was no peasant corpse. He was a charming aristocrat, preying on society through seduction and betrayal. This elegant predator contrasted sharply with the Slavic villager's nightmare. It was the first time the vampire became a sophisticated villain. From here, literature carried the vampire into new realms, slowly giving it the face we now recognize: aristocratic, alluring, and deadly. But the true cultural explosion was yet to come, and when it did, the vampire would become a global icon. In 1897, Bram Stoker published Dracula. It changed everything. Stoker's count was mysterious, aristocratic, and terrifying. Unlike the rotting peasants of folklore, Dracula was a calculated predator. Drawing on Eastern European legends and whispers of Vlad the Impaler, Stoker wove Gothic horror with historical dread. The novel introduced us to Transylvania, crumbling castles, and the image of a vampire blending into society by day, hunting by night. Dracula wasn't just a monster, he was a symbol. He embodied fear of the foreign, the unknown, and the corrupting force of desire. Audiences were captivated. The book spread the vampire myth far beyond Eastern Europe, rooting it deeply in Western imagination. Then came cinema. In 1922, the silent film Nosferatu reimagined Dracula as a ghastly, rat-like creature. It was haunting, grotesque, and unforgettable. A decade later, Bela Lugosi's Dracula, 1931, gave us the elegant vampire with a cape, a hypnotic stare, and the iconic phrase, "I want to suck your blood." From that point, the the vampire was no longer a folk terror, it was a cultural icon. By the late 20th century, new voices reshaped the legend. Anne Rice's interview with the vampire portrayed them as tragic, sensual, and conflicted beings. Vampires were no longer just villains. They were tortured immortals, struggling with morality, loneliness, and desire. Then came television and film reinventions: Buffy the Vampire Slayer, True Blood, Twilight, and The Vampire Diaries. Each adaptation gave vampires new layers: romance, rebellion, even heroism. Yet the hunger, the darkness, always remained. In the 21st century, the vampire is as much about eternal youth and forbidden love as it is about fear. Yet no matter how they evolve, one truth lingers: vampires remain mirrors of our own fears and desires. Vampires have always carried one power above all others: immortality. To live forever, untouched by age, is a dream humans have chased since the dawn of time. But in vampire lore, that gift is always a curse. They remain young as centuries pass, while loved ones grow old and die. Beauty and strength endure, but at the cost of endless loneliness. This paradox is part of why vampires endure as symbols. They are everything we want and everything we fear. The vampire reflects humanity's most haunting question: what lies beyond death? When we imagine these creatures walking in the shadows, we are really imagining our own struggle with mortality. Throughout history, vampire myths have been shaped by disease, fear, and cultural anxiety. From tuberculosis to plagues, when answers were scarce, people turned to the supernatural. These stories gave communities a way to explain tragedy, but they also created a legacy of myths that still thrill us today. In literature and film, vampires have shifted from monsters to tragic lovers, from fiends to heroes. Yet the darkness never leaves them. They embody temptation, desire, and the danger of giving in to our deepest urges. They also embody power. A vampire never just survives, they dominate, seduce, and control. That is why their image remains so powerful. And even now, stories continue to evolve. Some vampires sparkle in the sun, others brood in castles, but all whisper the same truth: immortality has a price. So perhaps the real reason vampires endure is not because of what they are, but because of what they represent in us. They are mirrors. They reflect our longing for eternal life, our fear of death, and the mysteries we cannot solve. And so, the final question remains: are they only legends, or is there something more in the shadows we still cannot explain? After all, the night is dark, and it is full of secrets. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the origins of vampires. If you enjoyed exploring these chilling legends, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join the Silent Lodge. Together, we'll continue venturing into history's mysteries, one shadow at a time. Until next time, stay mystical.